Good morning. This video is for anybody who is aspiring to be a judge. Judging is not simple. You have to be able to think logically and to be trained in logic. To illustrate this, we'll look at what happened to Goldilocks. A couple of videos ago, I explained that Mr. and Mrs. Bear brought a case against Goldilocks because they claimed she'd broken into their house illegally, stolen the porridge and broken a chair. Goldilocks claimed she was tired and hungry and Mr. and Mrs. Bear had a duty to help her out. So the judge, this is a relatively simple case, but not all cases are that simple. This is why in Deuteronomy chapter 1, after Moses had appointed 70 other men as judges in accordance with God's direction, he said to them, in verse 17, "Should a case be too difficult, bring it to me and I will hear it." But this case of Goldilocks was quite simple. The judge said to her, "Look, even if you're very hungry, you do not have the right to break the law. What you should have done," and here the judge has to give an alternative to prevent crime, she shouldn't have gone so far from home. If she was going that far, she should have brought a picnic, or she should have waited on the doorstep for Mr. and Mrs. Bear to come home. The porridge was on the table, so they obviously were not going to be too long. Yes, she broke the chair by accident, but it came about because of her illegal entry into the house. So she was fined a penny farthing to repair the chair, and in compensation she was to give them a lifetime supply of porridge. Now, how does Watchtower's judicial system come about? Are they able to think logically and to be able to sift through the various arguments to see which one is correct? Well, how it happened was that when Watchtower first started disfellowshipping people, it was an absolute fiasco. And they were being taken to court because they were announcing in the congregation that someone had conduct unbefitting a Christian. And it could have been slanderous. So they said to themselves, how can we protect ourselves from legal cases? And instead of going back to the scriptures and saying, are we as close to God's judging as possible, they should have looked more carefully at the two-witness rule, because it's extremely complicated. There's nothing simple about it. Also, they should have looked at Romans 13, where it says that the governments are to deal with criminal cases, not the Christian congregation. But they didn't do that. So in order to prevent legal cases, they hid behind a curtain of secrecy. More and more secret rules. The judicial hearing became extraordinarily secret. The excuse they gave for this was that it was confidential for the poor person who was being accused. That was not the case. It was to protect the organisation and the elders from legal cases. If you were called to a judicial hearing, you were not allowed to record it or to bring in any witnesses. This was so that you couldn't take it to court, because it would then be your word against theirs. There would be no recording, no witnesses to what had happened, and you would lose. The other problem was that Watchtower was trying to trap you or catch you out so that you couldn't wriggle out of the accusations they'd brought against you. This was because Watchtower believed that elders were infallible, that if they pronounced you guilty, that was definitely the case. So when inviting you to a judicial hearing, they wouldn't tell you exactly what you were accused of. So you come to a hearing having no idea that you're already guilty, not being able to defend yourself, and you were in this trap, you were caught in a net, and you had to say you were sorry. This so-called justice was not loving, it was not faithful to the spirit of Jesus' teachings, it wasn't merciful, and worst of all, it was not justice. So we can look here at Acts chapter 20 and verse 29. I know quite well that when I have gone, fierce wolves will invade you and will have no mercy on the flock. That is what has happened. If we had known all of this while we were out preaching, we wouldn't have invited vulnerable people into this organisation to be hurt by this injustice. So, if we can stay away from this injustice, that would be the best thing. And Watchtower is very little hope for you to have a good judgment at the end of the world. So please think about this carefully. Change your unjust ways to follow God's justice. Now, here's a situation where it's very difficult for judges to decide. And I'd like you to think about this. If you were really, really hungry and you hadn't eaten for days and were about to die because of lack of food, would it be acceptable to steal food to save your life? I'm not going to give you the answer. You might like to comment on this and see what you think. But it's an illustration of how difficult sometimes judging is. Take care, and God bless you all.